Sohail Hanif. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Chief Executive Officer of the National Zakat Foundation, one of the largest organizations that deals with zakat in the UK. An organization that has a long history and a big vision. Now, before we get into it, Dr. Sohail, first and foremost, as a way of introduction, I want you to tell us a little bit about who you are and why have you come working for the National Zakat Foundation. How did that come about?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. My background is in Islamic studies. I was a lecturer in Islamic law at Cambridge Muslim College. Prior to that, I was doing my PhD in Islamic studies at Oxford. Prior to which I studied, I lived in Jordan for 12 years, studying and teaching Arabic and Islamic studies. So I've spent a fair time, especially with the discipline of Islamic sacred law, teaching, researching, instructing, and it pulled me into National Zakat Foundation. And the reason why it pulled me was because it dawned on me deeper and deeper that our Islamic sacred tradition doesn't just present rules for the individual to do halal, haram, pray, don't pray, or pray, not, there's no don't pray, but the idea is that...
Do right, don't do wrong.
Yeah, exactly, but there's something far greater, or far bigger, I could say, which is a map and a vision for human societies. And I wanted to have a share in laying a brick on that map. And the zakat is one of the great institutions of our Islamic sacred law. And it really is a cornerstone in this social vision that our Prophet brought. God bless him and give him peace. And so it's this desire to contribute to building a world which he brought us to see is what's brought me here, basically.
Okay, so let's touch upon this element of zakat itself, right? Let's define what zakat is. Now, let's define it in two ways. One is the perhaps someone who is non-Muslim who is exposed to the definition of zakat being a tool for extremists and terrorists to do very bad things, right? And then the other definition is for a Muslim, zakat is a pillar of Islam. So what does zakat mean from these two perspectives?
If you don't mind, I'm going to probably combine the perspectives so no one should think there's a double speak or two ways that this is spun. It's a very simple point. And it starts with, first of all, realizing that zakat is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. These 5 pillars are foundational institutions that our Prophet, God bless him and give him peace, made the foundation of his community when he migrated to Medina, which is the latter half of his mission, to really establish this vision for a community in the world. These 5 pillars, each of them function to bring a community of faith together. So prayer is something we pray communally. We pray in the mosque. We stand shoulder to shoulder. Ramadan, you fast by yourself, but then you feed each other when it's sunset. Hajj, you worship God together, globally. I mean, you travel globally from this, you worship on that single plane. Zakat is one of these 5 pillars whose fundamental purpose is to establish a tie within the faith community. Meaning that whoever testifies that there's one God and Muhammad is his messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they should feel like they've joined a family. Faith is like family. And just like in family, there's a duty of care, in faith there is a duty of care because it should feel like a family. It's communal worship. And so zakat is that tie that we have to look after each other. That's a basic introduction to how zakat works. Now, what is zakat? Zakat, the best way to think of it is from the word itself. The word is an Arabic word that means purification and growth. Why does it mean purification? It's because we're taught that when a year passes over our wealth, it's no longer all ours. A part of it is the property of the needy. If you don't give them what's theirs, it's like you're usurping their wealth. So your sandwich isn't 100% yours. Your roof isn't 100% yours because you've bought it with money. Some of it didn't belong to you. It belonged to the needy. That's why when you give them their share, you've purified the rest. You've blessed the rest. You've maintained the rest. So in a very simple explanation, zakat is an act of purifying your wealth, because wealth is a blessing from God, who has determined that if you have surplus, some of it must go to the needy. And the institution, it serves the tie of faith within the faith community. That's why it focuses on the needy within the faith community. That's at the essence of how we can think about zakat.
And in terms of the distribution of wealth, how much is given to zakat? So what is the obligation upon a Muslim? And is it just a Muslim, or is everyone eligible, or does everyone have to pay zakat?
So zakat is one of the pillars of the Islamic faith. So it's Muslims who are expected to be paying zakat. And what you pay is actually very, relatively speaking, small. Because the rules of zakat are designed that it should not feel like a burden. It should not feel like something you have to run away from. Rather, it's something easy we can all partake in. And the blessing of zakat is when it all comes on the table, I pay, you pay, she pays, he pays. It's actually quite a lot. None of us felt the pain of that. And so the rules are quite easy in the sense that it's only 2.5%, and it's not on all of your wealth. It's just on what you have, really what is money-like or liquid in your holdings, meaning at any one snapshot, at once a year, there's a date. On that date, whatever money, gold, silver, because these were traditionally seen as money, and trade items, things you've bought to sell, these are the essence of your zakatable wealth. Whatever you have of these assets, and there's a few modern instruments that contain these assets, you pay 2.5% of that. So it's not all of your wealth, it's not a wealth tax. Your particular form of wealth that you're all year long trying to grow, which is these liquid money-like assets, just 2.5% of them.
So to use the analogy of a gardener, if a farmer was to grow crops, he has to feed the crop, whether it's water, fertilizer, feeding the crops to let the crops grow and give him a harvest. Would you say that analogy is a fair analogy to relate zakat with the growth of wealth for us Muslims?
It's definitely an important analogy in that the Quran speaks about seeds and farming as a language for faith. What I will say is as follows. A garden that's tended is not like an orchard that's tended produces fruits season upon season. Zakat is making sure that we don't forget the outliers. We don't just focus on the trees next to that we look at and everybody else is dying. Zakat is making sure that we, the collective, stand strong as a whole. So in as much as you could say our Prophet is the gardener, if you want to use the metaphor, God bless him and give him peace, he showed us the way to make sure no one gets left. No piece of soil is unwatered. No one who has surplus is free of need of thinking about what about the others. So as time goes on, we are all thriving. That's at the heart of it. Correct. Exactly.
So Dr. Sohail, National Zakat Foundation, an organization that deals with zakat. Give me an introduction. Why has this organization come into being, and what does this organization do in terms of zakat?
Okay, thank you very much. So NZF is the only organization whose vision is to collect and distribute zakat solely within and across the entire UK. No one else is doing UK-wide zakat distribution. Purely UK-wide. This is the first thing. Why this interest? Two things I'd like to say on that. First of all, our Islamic sacred law stresses the importance of distributing zakat in the place where you live. And our scholars give many reasons for that. They talk about the fact that it's difficult for people who are struggling financially to see wealth in their neighborhoods passing them by and not coming to help them. There's a form of social cohesion which you'll miss out on if you are not worried about your next door neighbors who might be struggling. This is the first thing. And so there's this whole sense that zakat is meant to be fueling local community thriving, community solidarity, community responsibility, community awareness. Who are my neighbors? What are their needs? That's why Salat and Zakat work so well together. The Quran combines them 28 times because Salat or prayer brings a community together within a space, namely the mosque and the various collective prayers, Jum'ah, Eid. And Zakat is saying, now you've got to look after each other. It's not about just being in the space, it's being a family in this space, the space being your community. So the vision of Zakat, which our classical scholars all agree about really, they only debate whether what I'm describing of localizing Zakat is a sunnah or a fard. Is it highly recommended or is it a duty? But they all agree it's part of the essential character of Zakat, localized institution. The other part of your question about why this all came about, because our classical tradition is quite old, but why did it start in 2011? What was a trigger?
2011 is when Zakat.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, correct. So what's the trigger? The trigger was actually stories of homeless Muslim women in Birmingham. That's how specific I can get. Women who were fleeing homes, fleeing situations of domestic violence, sleeping on the street because government support and external support doesn't just come in an instant.
Yeah.
You apply, you wait, you might be getting nothing for 3 months. Who's catching you? And so it was the story that we can't have Muslim women sleeping on the streets and we're not doing anything about it. One of the earliest marketing taglines for NZF was, what's the point of 3 million Muslims if Aisha has to sleep on the street? And so you get this sense that we are responsible for our neighbors in faith. How can we dare ignore them when their right is great because we're literally sharing the same roads, the same shops, the same mosques? If we can't take care of that, which is right at the core of what Zakat is, then what are we going to be building? How are we following the injunctions of our Prophet? God bless him and give him peace. That's at the heart of this.
What we focus on as Muslims when we give charity is the devastation and the poverty levels abroad.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's in Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, or Africa, or wherever it may be, we are giving our zakat, majority of it, to help people that are dying. But what you're saying is, we have people that are struggling in the UK as well, and when they have nowhere to go, this is where the Muslims should really kind of use their wealth to help. Is that am I on the right track?
You definitely are on the right track. Let's look at the metaphor of family.
Yeah.
If you look at the metaphor of family, you all know that if somebody is struggling greatly, lost their job, got very sick, about to be kicked out of their home.
Can you give me an example? Maybe someone that you've come across that has suffered the consequences of losing their home or a job? Because I think, for me, let's bring this to reality. Like, I know I've worked in the charity sector for 17 odd years, and I've seen people that have come off the streets. And sometimes there is a taboo that when we come across people on the street, we naturally assume that this person has deliberately found themselves on the street. They must be doing something dodgy. They must be on drugs or something like that. And we tend to ignore them as if they don't exist.
And not to forget as well that homelessness is not just on the street. It's what we might call sofa surfing. You know, people who literally are just plotting, or not plotting, but just trying to think, where can I get some shelter tonight? You might not even see them. And they're trying to go between friends and this area and that area. It's a very difficult situation. It's growing, it's visible, it's known. And we've helped many people avoid eviction. There was actually a lady I met, two ladies I can talk about, I met at events. It's not rare actually for me to be at an event and someone to quietly come up to me and say, thank you, I got help from NZF. There was a lady who was volunteering at an event I went to. She's working, she's establishing herself, and she went through a period she had nowhere to sleep, and she was going between home to home to home, and she managed to get some housing security from NZF, and now she's taking steps in her life. There was a lady I met in Bradford. She came to an event that we held, again very quietly, came up to me afterwards, didn't want to share too much of her personal story, but it seemed like what I could make out of it, a situation of difficult domestic violence. But she said, I was going through a very, very difficult time. NZF really helped me out. I was able to establish myself. I was able to start my life again. And she said, she said she came to that event only to make a sizable donation because she felt that she's out of her trouble and she wanted that money to now go to somebody else. And that's not rare either. For people to come back after a loop, they have their own journey and say, please pass this on now.
When they were a receiver of zakat,
correct.
And now they're empowered enough, what they want to give to somebody else that could benefit from.
We're working with a partner who's giving emergency cash, really small cash from a mosque. And someone came back after a while and said, here's your money now. I needed it for my moment and I'm fine now. And zakat's not a loan by any stretch. There's no expectation. But there's people who feel deeply grateful that the community was there for them. And although they might know the faces of the givers, they know that we, the community, are there for each other. And they want to give gratitude back to the whole by saying, here's a little bit from me as well. Please let it circulate. So the stories are really very many. In a year, like last year, we helped 30,000 people. That's, families, dependents, children. Child poverty is a major issue in the United Kingdom. A very large proportion, perhaps up to 40% of people we support are children. And so there's just story after story of people who get that little bit of helping hand at a time when they really needed it. That's at the heart of it. If I come back to your first question, which was just about what am I saying? And so what I'm saying is, if I was talking about the metaphor of family, I said, if your brother is like these people, or your sister, imagine your sister, right? She's in a difficult situation, has to be out of her home, isn't working, all this struggle. If you, her brother, aren't there for her, then it's the great shame on you, because you're her internal personal support network. Why should she have to beg with strangers when she has people who know her, who've been with her, who are there for her? Community is like that. That there are people who live on our streets. We have a special duty of care for them. That's what localized zakat is about. That's from our sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ and his companions. That you should feel, all of us, and it's not easy, because most of us are so glued to the news. Our giving follows the news, basically. What's on this Facebook, we give to. What's not on the Facebook, it's out of sight and mind. Your street probably won't be on Facebook. Your next door neighbor, exactly. And so the idea is, it's difficult, and that's what local zakat is, a mission. It doesn't just fall from the sky and I'm just doing it and I'm done. It's a transformation of what it means to be a member of our community. Is to be driven to know, who are the Muslims around me? What are their needs? Are their needs being met? Because if you're not doing it, who's going to be doing it? This is the idea.
How do people come across National Zakat Foundation? So, for example, the example that you use, that our very neighbours on the same street, we might not see them or hear about them. So how do they get in touch with National Zakat Foundation? And how is it that you reach out to these people?
So at the moment, the way that people reach out for us to support, it's fully online. That's why our reach is across the entire length and breadth of the United Kingdom. You apply for one of our forms of help. We help with hardship, whether it's with emergency cash for your basic essentials, whether it's with housing support for your basic furniture, avoiding eviction, rent arrears, and so on. Or we help with training to get into employment because you're struggling to secure your job. So you choose your track of what you're looking for and you apply online. We'll ask for various forms of supporting documentation. We will assess, and if you're successful, we will arrange for the payment to reach you, whether it's the cash for the emergency, whether it's the housing support or the training support. Increasingly, we are trying to increase the avenues for access for people, because Not everyone is tech savvy. Not everyone is great with reading English and filling in forms and so on. So we're increasingly moving to create hubs for support within our communities. Mosques, community centers you can walk into, you can get emergency support, and then you can become acquainted with the larger support that we also offer.
Dr. Sohail, I think there are some misconceptions perhaps
Mhm.
that zakat is for the extremely poor. Because often someone that needs zakat will not come and ask for help until they are very, very stuck, right? So how would you clarify that perception that zakat is only for somebody that has absolutely lost completely everything?
Yeah, this is an extremely important question, because our assumption that zakat is only for the person who has absolutely nothing is what prevents us from really breathing life into and serving this great institution. The simple reason why this can't be correct is if you look at the Quranic verse that lays out the recipients of zakat, it says the very first two groups of recipients are called in Arabic fuqara and masakin. Our scholars have debated which is which, but they all agree both means poor, and one of the two means the poor with the guy with literally nothing, and the other one means the poor person who has things but is struggling to get by. And so the fact that we have two words right at the beginning, it shows that the recipient of zakat sits on a poverty spectrum. They could literally have nothing, but zakat isn't only for that person. Because if we waited people to literally have something, then what kind of safety net is this? And so the point is, as soon as somebody is economically, financially struggling to get by, they are poor and they are zakat recipients. We, the community, have to catch everybody in this spectrum. And it would be shameful to say, wait till you're homeless, wait till you've lost your job, wait till you've lost your health, and then maybe we'll think about you. You've already lost them. You've already lost them. Yeah, correct. And that's why our sacred law has guidelines in terms of how you assess for poverty. Some of our scholars said you look at simply what they call sufficiency, or the Arabic word is kifaya, meaning what they need to meet their bare essentials, do they have them? If not, then you help them. Very simple. And others of our scholars, which is what NZF follows as well, they say that you have to assess their situation relative to a standard of poverty from our sacred law called the nisab, which is the measure of wealth above which you become a zakat payer. So if you believe the person in front of you, their surplus holdings are below this nisab, then you can give them zakat. So there's a standard on both sides, but none of them are tied to having nothing. And it's essential for us to see it like that, because you wouldn't want for your own family member to be behind closed doors, facing eviction, unable to pay rent, struggling with health, at the limit of stress. If you can imagine that situation, you got children, imagine the family fights and issues, it's stress, extreme stress. You don't know what you're going to do next. You wouldn't want it for yourself. You wouldn't want it for your friends. We shouldn't want it for our community. That's what zakat is about, and it's coming right out of our sacred sources. And not realizing that and saying, no, you have to be homeless, you have to be jobless, you have to be everything less, is not being true to actually what our sources are saying.
That's very, very interesting. Now, some might say that we're living in Britain, in the Western society, where we have a very good benefit system, the government is there, and really there are not many meaningfully poor people. Essentially, everyone who is registered receives some sort of benefit. So why and how does zakat? Surely my zakat is better spent abroad, where people don't have absolutely anything.
So we've already tackled part of that question when we've said we have a responsibility here as well.
Right.
We've tackled a part of it by saying it's not only for the person with nothing. All that's left is to say your first part of your question, which is there a safety net here? Is everybody getting by on benefits? And in my experience, the people who say that are people who are not truly working at the front line of our communities. Because if you ask anybody who works at the front line, in a mosque food bank, in a church, community charity space across our country, they will tell you situations are quite dire. If you talk to people who campaign the government, like the Trussell Trust and others, they've been saying benefits have fallen so far behind inflation, it's not actually even enough for many people just to meet their basics.
Food costs are going up, bills are going up, rent is going up.
Yep.
But when it comes to benefits, it's actually going backwards. Benefits are being cut
Mm-hmm.
in many ways. So I guess I think some people that I've come across, and asylum seekers who
Mm-hmm.
probably are some of the worst affected, sometimes they get vouchers rather than cash. And when they don't have enough to live on, they end up on the streets. Or let's talk about our sisters and our
Mm-hmm.
children. When mothers have to go through meals and have to skip meals because they don't have enough to go and buy a meal. Have you come across many people like that in that scenario where that's how they're living day to day?
Yep, we definitely do. I can tell you about a lady we supported recently. Wasn't quite the idea of a young child going without meals. It was a bit more of a complicated case where it was a university-aged child who started developing severe mental illness, at which stage the working mother needed to spend more time at home. And then that's what normally happens. Normally it's simple, because normally many people are just getting by. It's very difficult to get by with your rent and your bills and your food, and many families are just getting by. And so the moment you get something like ill health, an accident, what you find is one spouse is unable to work, the other spouse becomes a carer, and then everything goes downhill. In this instance, it was a mother had to stop working, had to be home for her child, really struggling at that stage then with bills and living. And we supported her with emergency support just for her immediate relief. And we also supported her with training to support her to actually work in a way that was suitable for her situation as well. So many situations like that. And you're absolutely correct. In addition to what we've said about benefits not being always keeping up, in addition to the fact that there's great strain on our frontline service providers across the country. You have what you've mentioned about asylum seekers, a lot of whom are Muslims. They make up a very important part of our community, an important segment of the people that we help. They're given very little, very basic support, long time in processing. And so who's going to help them? There's no, they don't have access to the full resource of public funds. Correct.
They don't have permission to work.
Correct. And then we've got, as you've mentioned as well, people who were just in the safety gap. I mean, not safety gap. They've fallen through the gap, I mean to say. Like I've mentioned about domestic violence victims, the support isn't immediate. So if you look at the whole spectrum, finally, if you look at the fact that our welfare system, whether we like it or not, is crumbling. It's not what it was or what it once was meant to be, if you just look at the NHS conversations. And so it's not accurate to say that there's no one in need. And rather, if we don't start now, I think we're going to have a lot of very, very struggling people. We already do, very, very struggling people in our communities.
Dr. Sohail, thank you very much for that informative discussion. And I think it's fair to say that we've learned a little bit about what Zakat actually is, how NZF has come about as an organization, and how we as Muslims ought to do our bit to help our community in the UK. Thank you very much. I think we'll leave it there for this episode, and inshallah we'll have a lot more to discuss in the next episode. Inshallah. Thank you very much, Dr. Sohail. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.